The stage lights in Munich burned with an intensity that made everything feel unreal. Thomas Anders stood at the microphone, his voice carrying "You're my heart, you're my soul" to 15,000 people who sang every word back. This was 1986. Modern talking was at their absolute peak. The synthesizers pulsed through the arena. Dieter Bohlen orchestrated from his keyboards, every note calculated for maximum impact. Everything looked perfect. The choreography was flawless. The sound was pristine. But tucked inside Thomas's jacket was a piece of paper that would shatter his understanding of what any of this meant. A letter. 4 pages. Written in desperate, careful handwriting by someone he'd never met. Someone who had risked everything, just to tell him a story. Before the night ended, that letter would make him cry in front of thousands who had come to see a pop star, not a human being breaking down. The tears weren't from sadness. They were from something far more complicated. The realization that while he'd been treating his career as performance, someone on the other side of a concrete wall had been treating his music as survival. Thomas Anders had been born Bernd Weidung in Mönchengladbach, where pop stardom felt impossible. His parents wanted stability. A practical career. Something safe. But Thomas wanted music that moved people. By his early 20s, he'd changed his name, worked countless small gigs, and developed a voice that producers noticed. Clean, powerful, emotionally complex, in ways most pop singers couldn't access. Then came Dieter Bohlen, an established producer with a gift for mathematical precision in music. He heard something in Thomas's voice that couldn't be manufactured. Vulnerability wrapped in strength. Pain that had learned to sound like hope. When they recorded "You're My Heart, You're My Soul" in 1984, both knew something significant was happening. The synthesizers created landscape. The beat created momentum. But Thomas's voice created the emotional center that made people care. The song exploded across Europe with unexpected force. Number 1 in Germany, Austria, Switzerland, then beyond. Countries where German music rarely penetrated suddenly couldn't get enough. By 1986, Modern Talking had 2 multi-platinum albums, 4 consecutive number 1 singles, sold out arenas across the continent. For Dieter, this was validation. His formula worked. He approached success with detached satisfaction. Charts. Sales figures. Strategic planning for the next release. But for Thomas, the experience was more disorienting. The crowds were enormous. The adulation overwhelming. But there was strange hollowness to it all. People screamed for Modern Talking. They bought records. They knew every word. But did they actually connect with what he was expressing? Or just responding to a sound Bohlen had engineered for maximum commercial impact? The question haunted him in quiet moments between the chaos of fame. What Thomas didn't understand was how deeply their music had penetrated behind the Iron Curtain. In East Germany, Poland, Czechoslovakia, their songs had become more than entertainment. They'd become symbols. In societies where Western culture was forbidden, Modern Talking represented freedom. Not political freedom, emotional freedom, the freedom to feel beyond prescribed ideology. Their music was smuggled on bootleg cassettes, copied until sound quality degraded to static. But the emotional core remained. Young people in East Berlin gathered in apartments, curtains drawn, playing Brother Louis low enough to avoid neighbors who might report them. The songs became anthems for a generation that felt trapped by systems telling them how to think, feel, want. Modern Talking's music said you could want something else. You could imagine a life beyond the one assigned. Thomas knew they were popular in Eastern Europe. Sales data showed it. But he didn't understand the depth. He lived in West Germany where music was entertainment. A commodity. He'd never experienced music as a lifeline. As the only color in grayscale existence. That understanding would come through 4 pages of handwriting. The letter arrived 3 weeks before Munich. Mailed from East Berlin, which made it unusual. Mail from the East was monitored, delayed, often never arrived. That it made it through suggested extraordinary determination from the sender. The envelope reads simply, "To Thomas Anders of Modern Talking." No specific address. No manager's name. Just hope that someone would care enough to pass it along. Most fan mail never reached artists. Secretaries sorted it. Standard responses were sent. The actual letters filed away or discarded. But something about this envelope caught attention. The East Berlin postmark. The careful, precise handwriting. It was forwarded through management channels to Thomas 3 days before the Munich show. He almost didn't open it. Fan mail had become background noise. Generic adoration that blended together. "I love your music. You're amazing." But this letter was different from the first line. "Dear Mr. Anders, you don't know me and will never meet me. I'm writing this knowing it might never reach you. But I need to tell you what your music has meant, because if I don't, I think I will disappear completely and no one will ever know I existed. The tone wasn't worship. It was roar. More desperate. Something that demanded attention. The writer was Katharina, 19, living in East Berlin in an apartment overlooking the wall. Every morning she woke to see the concrete barrier separating her life from the one she imagined existed beyond. She described growing up in a system that defined exactly who she should be. A good socialist. A productive worker. Someone who asked no questions and wanted nothing beyond what the state provided. She wrote how that existence eroded something essential, gradually, like being drained of color until brightness was forgotten. Then one day my brother came home with a cassette tape. He wouldn't say where he got it. Too dangerous to explain. But he told me to listen when our parents were out. So I did. The cassette was Modern Talking's first album. Recorded from West German radio. Copied through underground networks. Terrible quality. Static. Distortion. But Katharina described hearing "You're my heart, you're my soul," like someone's first breath after drowning. I didn't understand all the words. My English isn't good. But I understood the feeling. Someone singing about longing. About wanting what you can't have. About loving something that seems impossible. For the first time, I felt someone understood what it was like inside my head. She memorized every song. Not just melodies. The emotional texture. How each track made her feel less alone. Brother Louis became her anthem. Forbidden love. Barriers that shouldn't exist but do. The courage to want what the world says you can't have. Your music became proof I wasn't crazy for wanting different life. That feeling trapped wasn't personal failing. That longing for something beyond what I'd been given was human. Not deviant. Not wrong. Human. Katharina described specific moments. The day her university application was rejected, not for grades. For attitude. She'd ask questions. Been marked ideologically unreliable. That night she locked herself in the bathroom, headphones on. Cherry Cherry Lady, on repeat until crying stopped. The song is about missing someone. For me it became missing the person I could have been somewhere else. Missing the life I'll never have. Your voice made that grief valid. Another day near Checkpoint Charlie. Close enough to see tourists on the west side. A guard yelled at her to move. Not doing anything wrong. Just existing too close was suspicious. She went home and played Geronimo's Cadillac until she could breathe. That song is about freedom. Running. Escaping. I can't run. But listening makes me feel like some part already has. 4 pages. Each revealing how modern talking had woven into her survival. Sharing songs with friends who felt equally suffocated. Secret gatherings, music low, talking about impossible dreams. How modern talking became code. A way to identify others struggling with same questions. When someone mentions your music, I know they understand. We don't have to explain. Near the end, her tone shifted. Urgent. I need you to know your music isn't just entertainment for people like me. It's evidence. Evidence there's something beyond these walls. Evidence that feeling is real when the world says it's not. Evidence I exist as more than what the state says I am. Then the part that would break Thomas completely. I don't know if I'll be alive next year. I'm not planning anything, but living like this. Every day. Knowing this is all there is. It's killing me slowly. The only thing keeping me here is hope that maybe someday something changes. She ended requesting he keep making music. Because every song you release is proof that somewhere, people are still creating beautiful things. And as long as beautiful things are being created, maybe there's reason to stay alive long enough to hear them. Thomas sat with the letter, unable to move. Read it 4 times. Each time the weight increased. This wasn't fan mail. This was someone handing him their soul, asking him to understand what his work actually meant. Not chart positions. Not sales. The human impact. Life or death stakes he'd never considered, because he'd never had to. He'd treated modern talking as a career. But for Katharina, it was the difference between existing and disappearing. He had no idea how to carry that responsibility. The Munich concert was that night. Soundcheck was mechanical. Dieter noticed something off, but Thomas couldn't explain. How could he tell Dieter that their synthesizer pop was keeping a stranger in East Berlin alive? It would seem melodramatic. Maybe it was. But Thomas couldn't shake the feeling every word was true. That his voice was doing something he'd never intended. Saving someone he'd never meet. The show started. Massive crowd. Enthusiastic. Thomas performed the hits. Each song received expected reaction. But something had shifted. He wasn't singing to the crowd anymore. He was singing to Katharina. To everyone like her. To people for whom these weren't songs but lifelines. Midway through Brother Louis, it happened. Thomas had sung this hundreds of times. But tonight the words hit differently. There's no one with a broken heart like you. Katharina's broken heart. The specific heartbreak of being trapped. Let me help you mend your broken heart. But he couldn't help. Couldn't reach across the wall. The realization crashed mid-verse. His voice wavered. He caught it, but emotion was spilling. By final chorus, tears streamed down his face. The crowd noticed. Some thought it was performance. Others sensed something real. When the song ended, Thomas turned away. Walked to the stage side. Dieter stopped playing. The band fell silent. 15,000 people went quiet. Thomas pulled the letter from his jacket. Hadn't planned to read it. To share it. But keeping it private felt like betraying Katharina's trust. Like reducing her experience to something consumed alone. He returned to the microphone. I need to tell you something, he said. Voice unsteady. Earlier this week I received a letter. From East Berlin. From a young woman named Katharina. Complete silence. Thomas unfolded the letter. She wrote to tell me what our music means. Not because she's a fan. Because our songs are the only thing keeping her alive. He paused. Trying to compose himself. Failing. She can't be here tonight. Can't cross the wall. Will probably never see us perform. But she wanted me to know that every song we make is proof to her that beautiful things still exist. Thomas looked at 15,000 faces. People who could travel freely. Buy whatever music they wanted. People who took freedom for granted. I want you to understand something. When we make this music, we think about charts. Success. But somewhere in East Berlin, a 19-year-old woman is listening to these songs, and they're the difference between living and giving up. His voice broke. And I didn't know. I didn't understand. I thought this was just pop music. Entertainment. But it's not. For people like Katharina, it's everything. The crowd was crying. Enough understood what Thomas was saying. That art isn't about the artist. It's what happens when it reaches someone who needs it desperately. When it becomes more than sound. Becomes oxygen. Thomas folded the letter carefully. I'm going to finish this concert and sing every song for Katharina. For everyone like her. Everyone who can't be here but needs to know someone sees them. Knows they exist. Believes their feelings matter. Dieter started playing Geronimo's Cadillac. The song about freedom. Running. Escape. Thomas sang it differently than ever before. Not as pop, as prayer. For Katharina. For everyone trapped. Everyone who used music as evidence that a different world existed. The concert continued, but the energy had transformed. No longer just performance. Collective recognition of something bigger. The crowd sang louder. Not showing enthusiasm. Sending a message across the wall. You're not forgotten. Not alone. Your struggle matters. After the show, Thomas sat alone. Pulled out the letter. Read it again. Something fundamental had changed in how he understood his role. He wasn't just a pop singer. He was someone whose voice reached people in unimaginable circumstances. That voice carried responsibility he'd never acknowledged. The responsibility to mean something. Be honest. Create music that justified the faith people like Katharina placed in it. Thomas tried to respond. Wrote drafts. Tore them up. How do you respond to someone who's handed you their reason for living? He eventually sent a brief letter through channels hoping it might reach East Berlin. Never knew if it arrived. If Katharina read it. But he needed to try. Needed her to know her letter hadn't just touched him. It had changed him. Years later, after the wall fell in 1989, Thomas met many from East Germany. Many told similar stories, how modern talking meant something beyond entertainment, represented hope, freedom, evidence that beauty existed. Some cried telling him, others thanked him quietly. Each time he thought about Katharina, wondered if she'd survived, if she was among those who could now cross freely, if she'd gotten to see them live. He never found out. Despite efforts to locate her, Katharina remained a ghost. Maybe she'd changed her name after reunification. Maybe moved. Maybe never existed, and the letter was fiction. But Thomas didn't believe that. The specificity, raw honesty, desperate hope. Those were real. Whether Katharina was one person or composite of everyone who felt that way, the emotion was authentic. That's what mattered. The letter stayed with Thomas for the rest of his career. He kept the original safe, but more importantly kept the lesson. That music isn't neutral. It lands on people in specific circumstances. For some, background noise. For others, survival. The artist doesn't decide which. The listener decides. The artist's role is being honest enough that music, can carry whatever weight the listener needs. Modern talking went through many phases: success, conflict, breakup, reunion, another breakup. Each brought complications. Thomas and Dieter's partnership was never easy. Different personalities, different visions. But through it all, Thomas carried awareness that their music mattered in ways neither could fully control. In later interviews, Thomas sometimes mentioned the letter. Not in detail. He protected Katharina's privacy. But he'd reference it. "I once received a letter that changed how I understood music. It taught me what we create doesn't belong to us. It belongs to everyone who finds meaning in it." The story became part of modern talking's legacy. Not the flashy part. The deeper part. About human connection. Art as lifeline. The responsibility that comes with giving people something to hold on to when everything else feels impossible. Katharina's letter reminded Thomas that behind every chart position were individual human beings. People with struggles, needs, reasons for turning to music when words failed. Some lived in freedom and took it for granted. Others lived behind walls and treated every song like stolen oxygen. The artist's job wasn't distinguishing between them. The artist's job was being honest enough that music worked for both. Thomas Anders cried on stage in Munich because he realized he'd been making music without understanding its full impact. That realization was devastating and liberating. Devastating because it meant responsibility. Every song mattered to someone in unpredictable ways. Liberating because it meant purpose. The work wasn't just commercial. It was human. It connected people across walls, across systems, across arbitrary boundaries, separating lives. The letter from Katharina exists somewhere still. 4 pages of careful handwriting from someone who needed him to know his voice had reached her. That despite the wall, despite distance, despite impossibility of meeting, they'd connected. And that connection kept her alive long enough to write those words. That's music's power. Not topping charts. Not selling records. The power to reach across impossible distances and remind someone they're not alone. That their feelings are valid. That beauty still exists. That hope is justified. Modern talking synthesizers and catchy melodies might seem simple. Pop music. Commercial. But for people like Katharina, those simple melodies carried complex emotions, created space for feelings with no other outlet, validated experiences the official world denied existed. Thomas Anders learned that from 4 pages written by a stranger. He carried it long after stages went dark, crowds dispersed, modern talking became history. Because some lessons don't come from success. They come from understanding what that success meant to someone you'll never meet. Someone who trusted you with their truth. Someone who needed you to know your voice mattered. Not because of what it achieved. Because of what it gave. The gift of being heard. Being understood. Evidence that somewhere beyond walls, someone was singing about feelings matching your own. And in that matching, that recognition was proof that you existed. That you mattered. That your pain and hope and longing were real. That's what Katharina's letter gave Thomas Anders. That's what his tears represented. The moment an artist realizes their work is bigger than they are, more important than intended, more necessary than known, and the only appropriate response is gratitude mixed with grief. Gratitude for the privilege of meaning something. Grief for all the Katharinas you can't reach, can't help, can't save. Just witness through words on paper, and hope the music you make justifies the faith they've placed in it.